You don't belong here. Try somewhere more suited to your social class. An elderly couple stands outside Manhattan's most exclusive Italian restaurant. Their simple clothes marking them as outsiders in a world of designer suits and luxury cars. Frank Romano, 73, spent half a century perfecting his craft in a small Brooklyn pizzeria. His wife Maria saved every dollar for 3 years just to afford one meal here. Tonight, they've come to experience the cuisine they've dreamed of their entire lives. But the moment they walk through those glass doors, everything changes. Cold stares, whispered judgments, a staff that sees only their worn clothes, not their culinary passion. What no one in this room knows is that Frank isn't just any old man. One name, and one phone call, will flip this dining room inside out. Supply chains will freeze, smirks will vanish, and the question of who really belongs will finally be answered. This story will make you question everything you think you know about respect, class, and the true meaning of fine dining. Hit subscribe. Watch how one couple's dignity conquers Manhattan's cruelest snobs. The Manhattan skyline blazed in the amber light of twilight, its towering glass monuments reflecting the dying sun across the Hudson River. Along the cobblestone streets of Soho, neon signs flickered to life, casting prismatic shadows that danced across the weathered brick facades. Among these urban jewels stood Palazzo Nero, its obsidian exterior gleaming like a beacon of culinary excellence. Through floor-to-ceiling windows, diners could glimpse the orchestrated chaos within, servers gliding between tables draped in pristine white linen, sommeliers presenting bottles with theatrical reverence, and the soft glow of Edison bulbs casting everything in an ethereal warmth. A brass placard by the entrance bore the restaurant's accolades: Michelin 2-star, James Beard Award winner, New York Magazine's Best Italian 2024. The valet stand bustled with luxury vehicles, Tesla Model S sedans, BMW convertibles, the occasional Maserati. This wasn't just dinner, this was a statement. This was where Manhattan's elite came to see and be seen, where a single reservation could cost more than most people's weekly grocery budget. Frank Romano adjusted his worn leather jacket for the third time, his weathered hands trembling slightly, not from age, but from anticipation. At 73, he'd spent more than half a century perfecting his craft in the cramped kitchen of Romano's Pizza, a modest family establishment in Brooklyn that had closed its doors just 6 months ago. Beside him, his wife Maria, 70 years young with silver hair pulled back in a simple bun, clutched his arm with quiet determination. 50 years, Frank, she whispered, her voice carrying the faint melody of her Sicilian accent. 50 years we dreamed of this moment. Frank nodded, his eyes distant with memory. He could still smell the wood-fire ovens of his childhood, still hear his grandfather's voice echoing through the bustling kitchen. True Italian cuisine isn't just food, Francesco. It's soul. They had saved for this dinner for 3 years, carefully setting aside dollars from Frank's social security checks. Tonight wasn't about the money, it was about coming full circle. After decades of serving neighborhood families with red sauce specials and Friday night pizza parties, they wanted to experience what they had always aspired to create: authentic Italian cuisine elevated to an art form. Maria's simple black dress had been her best for 20 years. Frank's jacket, though clean, bore the permanent creases of a working man's wardrobe. They looked exactly like what they were retired. Brooklyn restaurant owners, not Soho sophisticates. But their eyes held something the wealthy diners inside lacked, genuine reverence for the craft they were about to witness. "You ready, sweetheart?" Frank asked, offering his arm. "I've been ready my whole life," Maria replied, her smile radiant despite the nervous flutter in her chest. The heavy glass doors of Palazzo Nero swung open with a whispered pneumatic hiss, releasing a wave of aromatic complexity: truffle oil, aged parmesan, fresh herbs, and something indefinable that spoke of culinary mastery. The maitre d', a sharp-featured man in his 30s with perfectly coiffed hair, and a suit that probably cost more than Frank's monthly pension, looked up from his reservation book with practiced efficiency. His eyes performed a swift, almost clinical assessment. Frank's jacket, department store, probably JCPenney. Maria's dress, classic but clearly not designer, their shoes comfortable rather than fashionable. Their jewelry minimal and clearly sentimental rather than valuable. The maitre d's smile, warm and welcoming mere seconds before, cooled by several degrees. "Good evening," he said, his voice carrying the subtle inflection of someone who had learned that tone was everything in the hospitality industry. "Do you have a reservation?" The dining room beyond was a symphony of muted conversations. Crystal clinking against crystal, and the soft scrape of silverware against fine china. Every table was occupied by Manhattan's glitterati, young tech executives in $1,000 casual wear, society matrons draped in understated luxury, celebrity chefs from other restaurants indulging in their competition's offerings. Frank and Maria stood in the entrance, suddenly very aware that they were out of place. The other diners weren't openly staring. But there was a subtle shift in the atmosphere. A collective recognition that these two didn't belong in their rarefied world. It was the kind of moment that could break a person's spirit or steel their resolve. Maria squeezed Frank's arm tighter, and he straightened his shoulders. They had come too far to turn back now. "No reservation?" Dylan Torres, the maitre d', repeated, his perfectly practiced smile faltering at the edges. Dylan had worked his way up from busboy to restaurant manager through a combination of ruthless ambition and an intuitive understanding of what Manhattan's elite expected from their dining experiences. He prided himself on being able to read people within seconds of meeting them, and everything about this elderly couple screamed problem. "I'm afraid we're completely booked tonight," he continued, gesturing vaguely toward the dining room where, despite his claim, at least 3 tables sat conspicuously empty. "Perhaps I could suggest some excellent establishments in Little Italy that might be more." He paused, searching for the diplomatically correct phrase. "More accommodating to your needs." Frank's face remained impassive, but Maria's cheeks flushed slightly. The insult was subtle but unmistakable. "You don't belong here. Try somewhere more suited to your social class. We understand if you can't seat us immediately," Frank said quietly, his Brooklyn accent more pronounced now that he was nervous. "We'd be happy to wait at the bar." Dylan's laugh was perfectly modulated, not openly mocking, but carrying just enough condescension to make his point clear. "I'm afraid our bar requires a reservation as well. And honestly, given the atmosphere we try to maintain here, I think you'd be much more comfortable at one of the neighborhood trattorias. Mama Leone's is quite popular with tourists." The word tourists hung in the air like an accusation. Around them, conversations had quieted slightly as other diners began to take notice of the exchange. Frank could feel their eyes assessing, judging, finding him and Maria lacking by every metric that mattered in this world. But in the kitchen doorway, partially obscured by the organized chaos of the dinner service, someone else was watching with different eyes altogether. Next time, The Room watches. Influencers hit record. One cook sees what everyone else misses. And the dining room's control slips. Watch episode 2 now.